Hi, my name is Ivis Garcia, and I am an assistant professor in city and metropolitan planning at the University of Utah, with a history of working with and for low-income communities in many different places. And I usually study housing strategies to meet the needs of low-income and diverse populations, and what is the relationship between uneven development, grassroots organizing, and community development. I'm especially interested in facilitating the integration of racialized and ethnic groups into democratic planning processes. And in this mini lecture, which is titled Community Participation as a Tool for Conservation Planning and Historic Preservation, you will learn what municipal planners, community leaders, and other professionals can do to protect, in this case, a Latino neighborhood from displacement caused by gentrification using the tools that they have available at their disposal. And second, which strategies, policies, and plans they can use to enhance, preserve, and protect neighborhoods through a participatory planning process. And three, how to identify innovative approaches to support development that actually mitigates gentrification-based displacement, such as public-private partnerships and repurposing publicly owned buildings. With the industrialization, many cities have turned to real estate as a means of increasing their tax base. Thus, historic preservation has come to serve as a tool for economic development and also tourism. Especially, this has resulted in an unequal distribution regarding where historic buildings are being restored in urban areas. Properties being renovated tend to be concentrated in downtowns or higher income neighborhoods capable of attracting tourists and local investment. In turn, tourism creates the income and tax bases that further increase the possibility of preserving historic buildings. While higher income neighborhoods have been able to restore many buildings, in poorer neighborhoods these properties have deteriorated over time, with the exception of perhaps publicly owned and maintained buildings like public schools. And most research has been dedicated, however, to understand the relationship between historic preservation and displacement, while literature has attempted to show how the process of preserving and restoring historic properties in gentrifying neighborhoods might provide an opportunity for reusing these structures to create affordable housing and ameliorate the displacement of local residents. And for this particular study, which you actually had the opportunity to read the writing, I use participatory action research. So this is where you are engaging for a long period of time with a community. And in this case, I was in the steering committee for community as a campus. But that actually emerged from a longer partnership that I had as a co-chair of the Puerto Rican Agenda, which is a group of Puerto Rican leaders and also organizations. And I went to many community meetings in that space, and I used that as information for the study, but I also had some 15 formal interviews for people that belong to this initiative, the Community as Campus, and also people that were outside of Community as Campus. And here you can see some pictures of us engaging in some strategic planning. And part of the idea of Community as Campus was how you can take students that live in the Puerto Rican community of Humboldt Park in Chicago, from where they're like little kids, and educate them in a in this in public schools, of course, but also like how the different organizations could be involved in the development of a child. So it's kind of like this whole idea of like connecting extracurricular activities and other things that are happening in the community with the schools. And it comes from this whole idea that it takes a village to raise a child, and this is an African proverb. And part of the idea is that these children will also be going to college and university, and potentially also become teachers in the community. So we had this idea of like growth your own. So just to give you a little bit of context, there was like a lot of closures in Chicago. So more than 50 schools closed in 2013. And this was because Chicago Public Schools has more than $1 billion in deficit, and the public school is like actually minority and low-income students, and this population is also shrinking. So the population in Chicago has been declining for this like demographics at the time. I think that now there's actually an increase in Latino population, and many of these schools were like underperforming, and so because of these closures, about 30,000 students were affected, and so they have to basically, their school was shut down and they needed to move somewhere else. And as I said, because the majority of students are people of color, they obviously were the most affected, and they were also 80% were low income. So shutting down a school, it can have like destabilizing effects in communities. Like people have to, now parents have to have longer commutes. Many of them might rely in transit. They might have relationships with like other kids in the neighborhood or with teachers, and those like social relationships are broken. In some of these neighborhoods, and this was like a big narrative in the media, the students actually like cross some like gang boundaries, so there was like an increase in violence. And it's also like a public asset that then is lost, because if CPS is trying to sell these properties in order to like recuperate some of these losses, it means that now that building is going to belong to a private entity. But most likely because like development doesn't happen quickly, and because, as I said before, these schools were located in African American neighborhoods and Latino neighborhoods, so there must be like a want to invest in those particular areas, and many of these communities have been like disinvested for a long time. So this means that potentially this could be vacant for like 10 to 20 years until like someone is actually interested in putting a bid for this building. So it can cause long-term disinvestment in the community. And just interviewing people in the community, these are some of the things that they were saying. So this is a quote from someone saying, with the excuse of having deficits alongside the imperative of reforming education and increasing students' performance level, the state is rationalizing neoliberalism. So again, every time that something is privatized, there might be this like complaint of like, we are getting rid of our public assets, and this is neoliberalism, or we are implementing austerity. Public teachers lost their jobs, and more likely these buildings will be transformed into charter schools or luxury housing. This is called neoliberalism, where public assets are sold out to private entities. It doesn't matter which entities, it can be private developers or non-profit organizations. Once these public assets are privatized, they are not going back. And this is actually a quote from a professor. And part of the idea is that people oppose the selling of these buildings. But again, at the end, these buildings were sold. So something, or were going to be sold. So something needed to happen. And we will get into that a little bit later. But just to give you also a context, in the school, the Humboldt Elementary. So it now, well, when it was closed, which is, I believe, 2013, the 362 students were in the school of a capacity of 900 students. And this was the case with like most public schools in Chicago. And part of the complaint was also that to make this decision of the closures, which in a way makes like rational sense because you don't have as much demand for this having this space, right, and maintaining this building. The one complaint that people had, it was like there's like lack of community engagement. And this is like how someone learned about it. I remember I received an automatic call from the school saying that the school was closing. I was like, what? For me, this came out of nowhere, you know. Then they had meetings about it, and I went. A lot of people complained, protested, but the decision was already made. And I think that this happens a lot in planning, that there is a proposal that is made, and there's like public hearings and public meetings, but by the time that people get there, decisions were made about what to do with these buildings. So the option to not sell it is not there in a way any longer. The question is, what are we going to do with this building that it was again scheduled for closure? And to give you a context also of like this community and the setting of this one Humboldt School, is a gentrifying Puerto Rican ending enclave, so 35 Hispanic, about 20% Puerto Rican, 18% foreign born, and 28% poverty, which is a little bit higher than the city, which is 22% as an average. $39,000 median income versus like 48,000 in the city, 320 in home value as compared to 223,000, and a little bit of like higher like actually rent, so $1,300 versus 965. But pay attention to the statistic. There's people who are children in this neighborhood, people who were less than 18 years old. It had decreased in the last decade by 40%, which is quite big. At the same time, this von Humboldt School, it is in prime real estate. So it is a place that is mixed use, it has a lot of amenities. You can ride the bus and also the train pretty easily, so it's transit rich. It's an area that is walkable, and you can live there and in 30 minutes be to the loop. And if this is where you work, then that's a very reasonable commute in public transit. So what were the things that the community needed to do to make a proposal that it was successful? And in this case, I mean the community as a campus. If they wanted to have this building to be used for purposes that they envision. So the one thing that they needed to do is like to gain political support, to talk to alderman, and in this case, the Alderman Moreno was in the Chicago Board of Education, and he was like making some of these decisions. And the one thing that the community did, it was like approach him and say, well, we want to actually rezone this building for for housing and for having a component of also affordable housing, but also having like mixed use. So having some commercial development there, having some space for community campus to be in there. So the building needed to be rezoned from a school, in this case, to mixed use residential and commercial development. And they needed to find people that had the money, that had the power to make this happen, because Community as Campus was not even a non-profit. It's just a group of people that met and have a vision, had a strategic plan. It was a collective of community leaders, but without any money. What they had, it was actually power, in political power, I should say. And so they make partnerships with the Illinois Facilities Fund, which is a community development financial institution, again giving funding for projects that are of some kind of social enterprise, like in this case WINCO, which was a group of architectural group, did a lot of like non-profit things, and the RBH group, which was a private developer from New Jersey that had done this kind of project before, Teachers Village, because again, this is what the whole envision of the mixed use was, just creating the concept of a Teachers Village. So they had to put together a bid of what they like to do, and part of it is like in this bid and proposal, they actually needed to appeal to the advisory committee of school that were like in charge of repurposing this building. So in a way, like this committee, what they did is that when they were thinking about what to do with these surplus buildings, they put very high in their priority that there will be some kind of community benefit. So this was actually written down in the bid. If we see that this is not housing all market rate housing, and it has something that it benefits the community, then we would like to see that. And the other thing that they wanted to do is having these buildings to be placed in the National Register of Historic Places. So in order to make a winning bid, Community as a Campus thought about these things and how they were going to accomplish that. And they also put a bid. It wasn't the highest bid. Actually, they put like $3.1 million into this building, and somebody make a higher bid, which I don't remember now. But Alderman Moreno, who was a part of this, he actually in this like hearing, in order to make the decision to whom we give this building, and there was like couple bids on this, it says use the argument that this project provided the highest value to the community, and it closely aligned with the community wants and needs. And this proposal was actually approved unanimously by the planning commission. Just to go back to this idea of like historic preservation, the Humboldt Elementary was designed by John F. Flanders. It was built in 1884. It's a 3-story building of Italianate style. And something interesting that I found while researching this is that all these schools that were built in Chicago at the same time, it had the same architects. So John Flanders built many schools, and he used like cookie cutter. So it was basically they have very like the same outline, and actually like these schools like they grew. So to accommodate for more students, it would be like you have like one structure, and then you have and other structures. So at the end, they end up being a little bit different. But it's interesting that to think that in 1884 there was like cookie cutter kind of development. It's a beautiful building, red brick and terracotta details with like coat, limestone. It's obviously very expensive today. Facades with the decorative brickwork. And this project of the housing for teachers, of the teachers village, the proposal was to make like 84 unit residential complex with like 42 affordable housing units. 17 of them were going to be at 50% of the area median income, and 25 at the area median income, and 42 that were, so they were kind of like equal in the sense that were market rate. And so here again you have like affordable housing and not affordable housing, different levels of affordable housing, and the rents were gonna be like from $900 to like $2,000 dollars at the time. I imagine now it's more. But important to note that this housing was for teachers, for educators, so it's kind of like for workforce housing. And about the teacher's average, this is like for one person, it earns about 70% of the area median income. So here you can accommodate for people who are making those salaries. But again, if someone is administration, they might win more than a teacher that is like just getting started. So this is a quote from a community leader. The Teachers Village presents a unique opportunity for educators to experience the community they serve on a deeper level. Specifically, teachers will have first-hand access to critical information about the environment that contributes to shaping their students' identity, community resources to complement classroom learning, and direct contact with community stakeholders and families. Additionally, their practice will only be enhanced by integrating themselves into the fabric of the community. Instead of being limited to a commuter who drives into and out of the neighborhood on a daily basis, the Teachers Village serves as a linkage for educators to truly be of and within the community. And this was like a very important goal of community as campus. The idea that the teachers that were working in that neighborhood could live in that neighborhood because they would be connected to the kids and to parents. They will understand the social cultural landscape there, and therefore there will be like a benefit added by these teachers being in the community. So here's just like drawing of like the bottom of the building and what will be there. This like commercial space, having a cafe, retail, plaza, green spaces, and having a collaborative space for teachers and again administrators, and having actually like a place where the community as campus would be, just kind of making the networking of these teachers administrations to be connected, and also have like community classes about how to teach students better, how to be more inclusive. So that's kind of like the whole idea of the community as campus. And this is like Jose Lopez, community leader in the Puerto Rican Cultural Center, but also part of the Puerto Rican agenda. And he said, the only way for us to make educational changes is by taking a holistic approach to educational practice, where we can harness the social capital of the community by bringing all the agencies and organizations to claim a stake in our educational experience. The idea is to create a community as campus, where we value the community as a critical space for intellectual engagement. The Teachers Village is part of that broader vision. And I know that I have talked a lot about this building and how it's like repurposed, and what was like the whole idea again is like to repurpose a building that it had the purpose of educating people, and still historically to make that connection of like having teachers and administrators there in order to maintain this like workforce in a gentrifying community, so students could benefit. So what I have like show you here is that this community group was able to make partnerships with different organizations. Many of them were politicians, non-profits, but also for-profit organizations to accomplish their goals, and they did that by organizing, by having a vision, by having an idea, and convincing people that it was a great idea. And at the same time, the planners, the people in charge of repurposing this building, when they were thinking about the kinds of projects that will win the bid, they were thinking about something that has a community benefit. So you, as a planner, could, in a way, trying to see what are like properties that the city owns, and you can say, well, this is like the public utilities building. It has been vacant for 20 years. I'm going to actually put this building for bid, and I actually want affordable housing here, or I want like mixed income housing, or I want like some kind of mixed uses, which also has like at the bottom floor some commercial. So you can do that as a planner and think about how the community will benefit, and how I do a structure a bid on a public property in order to benefit people that are low income, or the people that live in the community that potentially could be displaced. So in other words, how I mitigate gentrification. That's all I had. Thank you so much. And there's another article from Progressive Planning Magazine that you can find about this topic, and I also hope that you enjoy the reading. See you next time.